Although I don't always mention it, frequently the things that I teach here for free online come straight out of the mailbag where an investigator has contacted me and asked some questions. And this week is no exception. Hi, this is Larry Kaye with ShadowAnyone.com and the creator of the Investigator's Ultimate Guide series, which is premium private investigator training from someone who's been there and done that. This week I want to talk about place of employment. How do you find place of employment for a subject that you're investigating? This is exactly the type of thing I could sit down with you over a cup of coffee and just talk about for an hour and unload pretty much everything I know about finding place of employment. And you would find some very helpful things. I'm going to talk to you about a few of those types of things here today and now. But the bottom line comes down to a lot of times it really is just good investigative work. You see, with place of employment, there's no centralized database that holds that information for everyone. And that's kind of good news for you as an investigator because it's one of those things that an info broker can't do online for somebody. It's one of those types of things where a person can't just run their own database search to find the information. It's the type of thing where they really comes down a lot of times to needing an investigator. So starting with the most simple method, looking at social media, frequently right there you can see outright where the employer is. But clients aren't really going to come to you if that's the case, right? They've already done it themselves at that point. The next step for you as an investigator might be looking at places where the person has reported their place of employment, but offline. So one example of this type of thing might be in a divorce file. If your client has filed for divorce, you can usually, in most places it's public record, go to the courthouse, pull that file, and go through it, just flip through the pages, and you'll find place of employment. Maybe it's going to be current, especially in cases where there's child support issues that go on for years and they come back for modification of child support. You'll find maybe a current employer in there. Sometimes you'll find a previous employer in there. So finding a previous employer is actually very valuable to you for two reasons. One, if they're working in a field that requires a license or registration, you can go to that licensing agency either at the state level, maybe even at the city level, but a lot of times at the state, and do a search by name and find out what current employer has that person registered. And as a little side note, there's a very interesting thing about this. Not necessarily the job they have might be licensed, but something that they do with the job. So for example, dental assistant might not be a position that requires a registration with the state, but they frequently work x-ray machines and they might have to be registered or licensed to run x-ray machines, so you might find them registered as an x-ray tech. Second reason finding a previous employer might be helpful is because you might be able to interview someone there or use a pretext to find out where that person went to and find their current employer that way. Another way to find where someone's place of employment is by talking to family or friends. This might be an outright interview if you're doing a case like that, or it might be using a pretext. So there are many ways to find a place of employment, and I'm not trying to cover them all here, but I just want to give you a few ideas. I will say the last resort method, in my view, is to do surveillance. Sometimes, especially if they're not working a 9-to-5 job, that can be a little more time consuming because you do have to figure out when they're going to work and that type of thing. But surveillance is an option. Of course, I have the Investigator's Ultimate Guide to Surveillance. If you're interested in that, you can find out more over at ShadowAnyone.com. If you'd like to contribute to this conversation, feel free to drop any ideas you have about finding place of employment in the comments here. If you're watching this any place but my blog, maybe you don't want those suggestions so out in the open, go over to ShadowAnyone.com and search place of employment or POE in the search box and find this blog listing and put your comment there. It'll be a little more it's a little more likely that only other investigators are going to find it there. Only really the truly diehard people go over to the blog, where I do actually spell these things out in more detail in the written format. So if you do like just a nice clean bullet point way of learning this information, you will find that over at ShadowAnyone.com. In the meantime, this is Larry Kaye with ShadowAnyone.com. Remember, do the right thing, even if it's the hard thing.